Welcome to this week's episode of Humans in 5. A few weeks ago, we lost a major figure in evolutionary biology and anthropology. Richard Lewontin, a geneticist who spent most of his career at Harvard University, passed away.
You may not know Lewontin's name, but we've talked about some of his work before on Humans in 5. Lewontin was one of the first researchers to use emerging DNA research tools to look at genetic variation across a range of human groups. In the 1970s, it had long been assumed that humans could be classed into races based on external characteristics.
Lewontin challenged the idea that races existed as a biological phenomena and found that there was more genetic variation within groups classified as races than between any groups of humans. We know that any given individual is genetically distinct from another, but earlier researchers assumed that races grouped based on superficial appearances like skin or hair color must be genetically quite similar.
Lewontin found that 85% of genetic variation could exist within a population of Africans or Europeans, for example, but there was only a 7% difference between any given group. There was more variation within any given group of individuals than there was between any defined human groups. Africans, Asians, and Europeans were fundamentally alike, and external features like skin or hair color were not good indicators of real genetic variation. This work went on to reinforce the idea that races are socially defined and don't reflect any biological reality in terms of our DNA.
Lewontin also challenged the idea of biological determinism, which suggests that all characteristics of an organism, including behavior, are biologically fixed or controlled. He heavily critiqued this idea as it overlooked the important contributions of, for example, culture in shaping human behaviors. Lewontin noted that things like racism and sexism more accurately reflected socioeconomic factors than any objective science. He also argued that science was a social activity, grounded in culture, politics, and society, rather than some higher pursuit separated from day-to-day life.
One of Lewontin's most famous papers was written with Stephen Jay Gould, titled The Spandrels of San Marco and the Panglossian Paradigm, a critique of the adaptationist program. This has become a foundational and highly discussed paper. Gould and Lewontin argued that many traits we discuss in terms of evolution as adaptive, or arising for a specific evolutionary purpose through natural selection, may in fact be incidental traits that in and of themselves are not necessarily that important.
This paper highlighted that not everything we see in evolution has to represent an adaptation. Not all traits or characteristics have arisen for an explicit reason to be investigated. Some things just happen, and some features don't exist to optimize an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. This example is framed in the context of an architectural feature called a spandrel, which is a component of making a dome like you might see in a church or cathedral.
In some buildings, spandrels are richly decorated and eye-catching. This might lead someone to think that a spandrel is really important and essential in the creation of a building. But in reality, a spandrel is just an artifact of building a dome. It may look interesting and flashy, but the building doesn't exist to showcase the spandrel. The spandrel just happened as a structural component. This idea was co-opted to discuss some biological traits. Some traits may seem really essential, but not all traits exist for some specific reason driven by natural selection. They might just be holding some other trait up and coming along for the evolutionary ride.
Lewontin's work wasn't without controversy, and he could be quite sharp in his criticism of other researchers whose work he didn't agree with. His animosity with E.O. Wilson, a proponent of sociobiology whose work Lewontin viewed as deterministic, was downright famous. But his work on genetics, the importance of environment and culture, and critiques of some long-standing theories in evolution and anthropology still have resonance today.
We hope you don't get too caught up in staring up at metaphorical spandrels, and we'll see you next time on Humans in 5.
And don't forget to subscribe!